This week's Parshas Vayetzei. Vayivga b'mokom v'yolen sham, Rashi brings, Ein pegia elo loshon tefillah. Yaakov Avinu tiken tefillas arves. So in this week's Parsha, the beginning of the Parsha, the origin of Tefillah comes to a climax. Avram tiken shachris, Yitzchok tiken mincha, Yaakov tiken arves. The three Tefillahs we daven every day originate with the Oves Hagdoshim, and that's a Gemara in Brochas Chavav Omed Beis. Two different opinions. One says, Tefillahs Oves Tiknum. Each of the Oves was masaken one of the three Tefillahs. Rabbi Shua ben Levi says, Keneged Tamidim. Shachas Mincha, Keneged Tomet Shel Shachar and Tomet Shel Beinu Abayim, the two Tamidim that were makriv every day. And Tefillas Arves is Eivarim Ubdorim, Shekmaktorim Al Gabe HaMizbeach Kol Halayla. And today we will be discussing the importance of Tefillah B'tzibur. Because I know in many yeshivas, probably not in this great yeshiva, but in many yeshivas, sometimes bochum get up late. They like to be up late by night. Probably they learn with such a smother that you just can't detach them from the Gemaras. And then they get up late in the morning. And sometimes they daven b'yachidus. How important it is to daven with a minyan. And we will see that there are two different opinions. Is Tefillah B'tzibur a chiyuv, like many other mitzvahs that are bonon, or is it just the right thing to do? So the Lashon of the Shulchan Aruch, Siman Tzadik, source number 1, and today we will go through the sources Lefi Seder. Yishtadel odam lehispalel bebeis hakneses im hatzibur. What does the Lashon Yishtadel mean? Well, literally translated, Yishtadel is try, do your best, make an effort, which would seem to indicate it's not a chiyuv gomer, but it's something you should do. The Tur writes, L'chein tzorech lehishtadel bekol koichoi lehispalel im hatzibur. So the Tur writes, B'kol koichoi. The Beis Yosef skips those two words. Does that mean anything? Would one say that the Beis Yosef saw the Tur writing B'kol koichoi, and the Beis Yosef says, B'kol koichoi, who says? Shtadl. Doesn't need to be B'kol koichoi? No, that would be a total mistake. Anybody familiar with the style of the Beis Yosef and Shulchan Aruch knows that the Shulchan Aruch was very, very adamant about kitzur. And even when he quotes the Lashon of the Rambam or the Tur, which he many times does, just quoting verbatim what the Rambam and the Tur write, he will always cut it short and omit words. The third edition of the Beis Yosef, I think the Shulchan Aruch came out 4 times during his lifetime. One before the last, the Shulchan Aruch was divided into 30 sections, Dalet Chelke Shulchan Aruch. And the Beis Yosef's idea was that every Jew should go through Dalet Chelke Shulchan Aruch once a month. Today, any Tehillim you take into your hand, you will realize that Tehillim is divided into 30 sections. And many people finish Tehillim at least once a month. So the Beis Yosef divided the Shulchan Aruch into 30 days. And the last edition that came out during his lifetime, it's no longer there. So I imagine people told the Beis Yosef, what's wrong with you? Do you really think anybody is going to learn Dalet Chelke Shulchan Aruch every day? Where are you living? On the moon? In the skies? It's not real. It's, you detach from reality. So we dropped the idea. But anyway, And that was before we had Mogen Avraham and Taz and the Shach and the Sman, the Shach and the Taz and the Beis Shimon and the Chelkas B'rei. Before we had all the other stuff, before we had the Ramah. So, but the Beis Yosef was very, very concerned about Kitzur. And that is very obvious. So the fact that the Torah says Yishtadel b'kol koichoi and the Beis Yosef writes Yishtadel doesn't mean anything. Yishtadel b'kol koichoi. Rambam, source number 3. Tfilas hatzibur nishmas tomid, afilu hayu behem chata'im, or chot'im. So when you have a minyan, even if a few of the people are not the biggest tzaddikim, and we all would like to daven at a minyan of tzaddikim, and the Rambam says, no, that's a mistake. 10 Jews. Afilu hayu behem chotim, ein HaKadosh Baruch Hu moyes v'tfilas hatzibur. HaKadosh Baruch Hu loves them all, and anybody that comes to shul to daven to HaKadosh Baruch Hu is accepted, and kol beyasora shchinto sharia. And the Shekhinah comes to dwell if 10 people daven together. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't say why, but this guy ate in a non-kosher restaurant, and that guy, questionable. Other mitzvahs. Afilu hoye b'em choitem, ein HaKadosh Baruch Hu moyes b'tfilas harabim. V'tfilas hatzibur nishmas tomed. Lefichach tzorach odem l'shat v'satzmarim b'tzibur. V'lo yispal b'yochid, kol zman sheyochel yispal elim hatzibur. Moshe Feinstein wants to prove from the Loshen, tzorach odem l'shat v'atzmarim hatzibur, that's a chiyuv, tzorach. And a minchas osher on the COVID pandemic, which came out 5 years ago. And in that sefer, there are many tshuvas about Tefillah. Because as you remember that period, total chaos, and hundreds of thousands of Jews, at least in the initial stage, daven b'yechidus. And in the sefer minchas osher on Corona, most of the sefer is halacha, tshuvas, but there are some letters of chizuk which I wrote. And I wrote an idea to be mechazik people that needed to daven b'yechidus. And I wrote, the most beautiful music is when you hear, a symphony, if it's vocal music, then it would be a makela. I don't know what a makela is in English. Choir, and if it's instrumental music, then it would be an orchestra. But if you want to appreciate Yosele Rosenblatt, or Helfgott, or a person with an amazing talent and amazing voice, you'd only appreciate him if he sings solo. So listening to an orchestra is the most beautiful music. But if you want to appreciate Yitzchak Perlman and his violin, you need to hear him solo, not when he's playing together with 50 other musicians. So I said, sometimes the HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants to listen to the solo. Sometimes, it's up to him. Usually, davening with a minyan is a choir. Davening with a minyan is listening to a symphony of the best orchestra in the world. But sometimes the HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants to hear us individually. He wants to hear the solo. But when it's not an epidemic, as we see Rambam, Tur, Shulchan Aruch, you need to daven with minyan. Is this a chiyuv based on a tekonas chachamim like any mitzvah d'Rabbanon? Or is it something you should do because everybody that davens hopes that HaKadosh Baruch Hu will listen to his tefillas? And the greatest gila to make sure that your tefillas will go up to the heavens is davening with a tzibur. Tfilas hatzibur le'olam nishmat. So the Moshe's shita is chiyuv gomer, and he proves it primarily from source number 4. Omer Rebbe Vo, Omer Reb Shimon ben Lakish, that's a gemor in Psuchim daf mem vav. Legabel, letfilah b'natilas yadayim, arba mil. 3 things necessitate making an effort and walking an extra mile. Mil is not exactly a mile, but arba mil is almost the same as a mile. So 3 things necessitate walking Arba Mil. Legabel, Letfillah B'Natilas Yadayim. Tefillah is a machlekes Rashi and Tosfos. Rashi says daven with a minyan. You're on your way, and you arrived at a hotel or a motel or a friend's home, and you don't have a minyan. You need to walk an extra mile, dalid mil, to daven with a minyan. That's Rashi's opinion. Tosfos says you have a minyan, but there's no water for Natilas Yadayim. And before davening, you need Natilas Yadayim. You need to walk dalad mil to have water for Natilas Yadayim. The Shulchan Aruch paskins in accordance to Shittas Rashi, and that is source number 6. Ha'olech b'derech ve'egia le'ir v'roitze lolom bo. It's by night. He wants to go to sleep. Im lefonav dalad milen mokem shemisparalim bi'asoro tzorech leilech lisham. So the Shulchan Aruch paskins in accordance to Shittas Rashi. What does tefillah mean? Davening with a minyan. And obviously, the way it is described in the Torah and the Shulchan Aruch, you're in the middle of the way, and you're walking. You don't have a car, you don't have a vehicle, you're walking, and you want to go to bed. It's night. You could daven b'yechidus, you need to walk an extra daled mil to daven with a minyan, and that would prove the importance of davening with a minyan. However, source number 7 seems to convey a different message. Rav Ami v'Rav Asi, afal gav dahavalei tleisa bekenishta b'Tveria. Rav Ami v'Rav Asi lived in Tveria, and there were 13 shuls in close proximity. Lo yava masle lebein ha'amida dahavi garsi. They preferred to daven in the kollel where they're learning, and they didn't go to shul. So in days of yore, Botei Knesios and Botei Midrashes were not the same. The Beis Knesses was dedicated only to Tefillah, and the Beis Medrash only to Torah. Baruch Hashem, in our day and age, we are witnessing a huge influx of Bnei Torah, and the Torah community is growing by leaps and bounds. Every shul is also a Beis Medrash, and every Beis Medrash is also a Beis Knesses. Almost every shul in Yerushalayim has a few kollel or yeshivas. So today, this dilemma is no longer relevant because every Beis Knesses is also a Beis Medrash, and every Beis Medrash is a Beis Knesses. But when you visit old shuls in Europe, usually the big sanctuary is a Beis Knesses. It's beautiful, it's large, it's huge. And then there's a little room and some broken benches outside in the side. That was the Beis Medrash. That was where they learned. And Rav Ami v'Rav Asi had 13 shuls, but they didn't go to shul. They davened where they're learning. And it's a machlokes Tosfos and Rambam. What does that mean? Let's have a look at Tosfos. Rav Ami v'Rav Asi shoyim espalelin biyochid. According to Tosfos, Rav Ami v'Rav Asi davened b'yechidus. They didn't go to shul where there's a minyan because they preferred to daven in a Beis Medrash. Kuf Nun Gimel Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim, based on Megillah Daf Chavav. What has more kedusha, a Beis Knesses or a Beis Medrash? Which has a higher level of kedusha? It's a machlokes in the Gemara, but the halacha is a Beis Medrash has a greater level of kedusha than a Beis Knesses. What is the nafkamina? Malam b'kodesh v'loy moridin. If there's a shul, you could transform the shul, change it into a Beis Medrash, but you cannot change a Beis Medrash into a Beis Knesses because malam b'kodesh v'lo moridin. So Rav Ami v'Rav Asi preferred to daven b'yechidus, we there learned, than to go to daven with a minyan in shul. But the Rambam has a different opinion. We turn the page. I don't see the Rambam. It's not on our page. The Rambam in the Cheles Tefillah says, it is preferable to daven where you learn and not in a shul. V'hu sheyespalel ba'asora. The Rambam says, if your two options are b'yechidus and a Beis Medrash, minyan and a shul, definitely go to the minyan. But if you have a minyan here and there, It is then that Rav Ami and Rav Asi prefer the davening where people learn Torah. But davening in a Beis Medrash does not override a minyan. According to Tosfos, it is preferable to daven in a Beis Medrash without a minyan than to daven in a shul with a minyan. So if any of you ever want to daven b'yechidus, it needs to be here in the Beis Medrash. And that would seem to be a bit uncomfortable. So if you ever want to daven b'yechidus, it needs to be in the Beis Medrash, not anywhere else, not even in a shul. So what is the machlokes between Tosfos and Rambam? Rav Moshe Feinstein understands in Igros Moshe the machlokes is, according to the Rambam, minyan is a chiyuv. So the added value of davening a Beis Medrash can't override a chiyuv to daven with minyan. According to Tosfos, it's not really a chiyuv, and therefore the dilemma is, what has more significance, davening in a Beis Medrash or davening with a minyan? But the halacha is, in accordance to the Rambam, a minyan definitely comes before davening in a Beis Medrash. Interesting, we're going to have in Hilchos Chanukah, and it's almost Chanukah. The Magen Avraham writes in Hilchos Chanukah, we don't need to go through this entire Magen Avraham because it's a complicated sugya, but at the end of the third line, Be'emes kama pa'omim shu torud ba'asokov, ein tzorach leilach lebeis hakneses. So the Magen Avraham writes, if you're busy with your business, with your doings, whatever you're busy with, not always do you need to go to the Beis Medrash, and you could daven b'yechidus. Yad Eliyahu was almost a contemporary of the Magen Avraham, and he writes, Shaila, im chuyev odem l'shtar l'spera l'matzibar, av b'mokem sheyover edei hefsed mamoin. You're sitting in your office, and you're just about to sign a deal which will be very beneficial financially. And it's mincha time, and you feel, if I'm going to let this opportunity pass, and I'm going to run to shul, and the other party is not going to wait for me, I'm going to be losing money. The other Lior Paskins, you do not need to daven with minyan if that's going to cost you financial loss, which seems to coincide with the Magen Avraham. Sometimes Torah Basokov, and he's potter from davening b'tzibur. This would indicate that davening b'tzibur definitely is the right thing to do, but it's not a chiyuv gomer, because we do not find that a potential monetary loss would override a chiyuv d'Rabbanan. But that is a separate discussion. How much money do you need to spend to be Mekayim a mitzvah? If there's a limit to how much you need to spend, maybe financial loss would be the equivalent of you don't need ein odam chayav lebazbez on rav mitzvahs is the lashon of the Ramon Simen Tov Reish Nun Vav. So the Igros Moshe, source number 11, and 11 and 12 are two different opinions, contrasting opinions. Igros Moshe, source number 11. Im Talmud Chocham Rashai Lespal B'Yechidus B'Asher Sheroitze Lilmod B'Zman Muchar B'Layla V'Yikshe Lefanav Lakum Lespal B'Tzibur. Tanis Yud Zayin is just the date. It's not part of the Shaila. This tshuva was written Shavuos B'Tamis, Tov Chov Gimel. That's more than 60 years ago. So the Moshe deals with the very same question as many yeshiva bochum think they're dealing with. You want to learn late by night, and you know you're going to get up late in the morning, you're not going to daven with a minyan. I assume that the Moshe was a masmid, one of the greatest masmidim of our times. He was the ultimate gadol b'Yisrael, and I knew the Moshe. And probably he liked to learn by night, and he's very much against this. Hine, lesparal ba'asoro chiyuv mitzvah la'odem v'lo rak hidur v'mala ba'alma. De'ule Parshas b'Psachim Mem Vav mechuyev lalich ad daled mil. So, as I mentioned before, Rav Moshe proves from this halacha, if you need to walk daled mil just to daven with a minyan, that proves that davening with a minyan is a chiyuv, and not only a male ba'alma, not only is gula, but a chiyuv. And therefore, Rav Moshe says, no, that's no teretz. You want to learn by night, if you know you're going to get up late in the morning and you won't have a minyan. Eimik brocha. So when I quote Sforim, I like to share some details, biographical details about the Mechaber. Eimik brocha is Reb Aryeh Pomeranchik from Yerushalayim, and he was a Talmud of the Brisker Rov. And many Yesodis of the Brisker Rov we know only from Reb Aryeh Pomeranchik. He wrote 4 magnificent Sforim. Eimik brocha is one of them, on Sugis and Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim. He died when he was 30 years old, a younger man, which is mind-boggling. And he wrote 4 amazing Sforim, and he was one of the Choshes, the Talmidim of the Brisker Rov. So, paragraph number 3, a contrasting opinion to Rav Moshe Feinstein. Omnam, asher nere li bezeh, der be'emes Tefillah b'tzibur einoi klal chiyuv mitzvah kekol mitzvahs derabanan, v'raya lezeh, he brings the Gemara and Brachos to prove his point. Reb Nachman was asked, "Mai tam aloi osa male b'nei kinishte litzeluye?" Reb Nachman davened in a steady minyan every day. One day he didn't show up. His chaverim asked him, "Why didn't you come to daven?" He said, "Lo yachilna, I couldn't make it." Rashi writes, "Toshash koicha," he wasn't feeling well, couldn't come to shul. Amalei likanfi ma'ila asora velitzei. So why didn't you call 10 people to come over to your house? We would be happy to come over to daven in your home. You should have a minyan. Amalei trichali milta. Didn't have koyach, too much of an effort. So Rabbi Pomeranchik says, an effort, if it's a chiyuv, the Menachem would make that effort. Maybe it was too much of an effort. So this is a dilemma. Reb Nachman says, I didn't call a minyan because it's a schlep. It's an effort. But on the other hand, the Gemara says you need to walk Daled Mil. Walking Daled Mil to have a minyan is not an effort. You know, it's about a mile. And it's a long way. It's a long walk. So how do we reconcile the Gemara that you need to walk Daled Mil to daven with a minyan, and Reb Nachman didn't even walk. I mean, he just needed to call some people over to his house. But we need to realize he didn't use WhatsApp, not even email, not even messaging. His cell phone lost battery, so he couldn't call anyone. So 2,000 years ago, how did you bring 10 people to your home? You needed to go out and knock on the doors or go to shul and try to bring some people. So we don't know what the situation was. But these two Gemaras are two sides. On one hand, you need to walk Daled Mil. So the situation of Daled Mil, I'm just trying to guess and figure it out. Daled Mil, I know exactly where the shul is. I know the distance. I just need to get there. So yes, you need to walk Daled Mil to have a minyan. But in days of yore, bringing together 10 people to your home, I mean, sometimes it would take minutes, and sometimes even in an hour and a half you wouldn't find those 10 people. So Rav Nachman says, Trichana Milta. And Rabbi Pomeranchik and Eim Baruch wants to prove on that Gemara that it's not a chiyuv. I think Rav Moshe's raya is more convincing than the Emek Baruch's raya, because Trichali Milta could be a huge tercha, and he doesn't even know. Well, where will I find those people? Who says they're home? Who says they'll come? Or they could come? And therefore, I do not think that the story of Menachem proves that it is not a chiyuv. But these are two different approaches, two different opinions about davening with minyan. Reb Moshe, and there's two tshuvas in Nigis Moshe about this. I think it's Cheder Gimel Siman Zayin is the other tshuva. Reb Moshe says, davening with a minyan is a chiyuv gomer like any other mitzvah d'Rabbanan. However, if it's a huge terche, as we see in the story of Reb Nachman, you're not mechuyev. The Emek Brocha says, it is not a chiyuv. How would he explain the din of Daled Mil? What is clear, it is a discussion how we define davening with a minyan, but it definitely is something of extreme importance. Like the Rambam writes, Tefillah Tzibur Nishmas Tomid. And if davening with a minyan was important years ago, so much more today, because the poskim say 400 years ago that our kavanah is somewhat diminished, and not always do we have proper kavanah. So if you really want your tefillahs to be answered, and you really want to benefit from your tefillahs, the Eitzah Tova is daven with a minyan. Because when you daven with a minyan, tefillas harabim, nishmas tomid, ve'ein HaKadosh Baruch Hu moyes betfilas harabim. So yes, it is something that is very, very important. As the Rambam writes, Lo yispalil yechidi kishi yochel hispalel im hatzibur. That very same Gemara about Rav Nachman in Brochas of Zayin, the Gemara says, if someone can't make it to davening, for many reasons, he's not feeling well, he's at home, it still is his guna to daven, b'shor sha'atzibur mispalalim. You know, when the tzibur davens, daven along with them, even if physically you are not in the Beis Medrash, and that is also his guna, b'shor sha'atzibur mispalalim. Another important point when we talk about Tefillah b'tzibur, lechatchila, one should start Shmoin Esra together with the tzibur, together with Tefillah Salachas, with the entire tzibur. And not everybody is aware of that, and the Mishnah Berurah makes it clear that Tefillah b'tzibur lechatchila means that everybody starts Tefillah Salachas together. Because it is very common in our shuls and our yeshivas that a lot of people come late. And they think, well, I'm still davening with a minyan. Doesn't matter if they're davening Shmoin Esra and I'm in Hoidu or in Ashrei. Well, it's better than nothing. After all, you're davening with the tzibur. But lechatchila, they all should start Shmoin Esra together. And that is the lechatchila tefillah b'tzibur, when 10 people daven in tandem, when 10 people daven together, and they all start the Shmoin Esra together. So we spoke a bit about the importance of davening with a minyan. Tefillah generally is the most intimate one could become with a Kodesh Baruch Hu, which is talking to a Kodesh Baruch Hu. Talk to him, because he's listening to you. We have Taryag mitzvahs, but the most intimate and the most personal one of them all is davening. Ask him for your needs and believe that he is waiting. He is waiting for your tefillahs. HaKadosh Baruch Hu mesavel et tefillosan shel tzadikim. And when it comes to davening, each and every one of you should feel like a tzaddik. Because you are tzaddikim fundamentally. Shiva boy that's dedicating all his day to learning and to davening is a tzaddik. And you need to believe, and not only believe, but also to feel HaKadosh Baruch Hu mesavel et tefillosan shel tzadikim. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu is waiting for your tefillahs. And he has open ears waiting for your tefillahs. So tefillah is the ultimate kirvus Elokim. And that's why the Gemara says in Tanas Abeis Amud Aleph, Ei zui avodah shebelev, zu tefillah. No other mitzvah comes from your heart and touches your heart more than tefillah. So the Baal Shem Tov explained the Gemara in Brochas Davov. Mai dechsiv karum zulus livnei Adam, the Pasuk in Tehillim. Devar ha'ma'omdim berumay shel olam, uvnei Adam mezalzelim behem. and that's Tefillah. So the Baal Shem Tov explained, what brings people to be mezalzel in Tefillah? How could people be mezalzel in Tefillah? It is because of a very painful phenomenon, which most of us felt more than once in their lives. Not necessarily young bocher, but anybody that has white hair. And it happens to everyone. A member of your family is desperately ill. And we come together and we daven and we cry to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And we organize minyanim by the Kaisel and we cry out from the depth of our hearts. And sometimes nothing happens. And the person passes away and we don't see any effect our tefillahs had. And ultimately, not because we want to, but even subconsciously, it brings a certain zilzul in tefillah. So the Baal Shem Tov said, Dvorim ha'oimdim beru mo'ishalaylam. You should believe and know that every tefillah that has proper kavanah goes up to the heavens, to the kisei hakavod. No tefillah ever sinks into oblivion. No tefillah goes unheard. No proper tefillah goes unanswered. But sometimes we may never know how HaKadosh Baruch Hu answered our tefillahs. What did he do with our tefillahs? Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows what is good and what needs to be. You daven for one thing and HaKadosh Baruch Hu grants you another. You daven that your business should be successful and HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives you life instead of wealth. We would never know what HaKadosh Baruch Hu did with our tefillahs, but we need to believe, as the Baal Shem Tov explains, tefillah is dvorim ha'oimdim beru mo'ishalaylam. So never be mezalzel in tefillah. And the Gemara says, hisparalo dem v'lo ina'ana. Person davened, and his prayers weren't answered. Ma ya'aseh? Yachzor v'yitparel. Shenamar kaveh el Hashem. Chazak v'yamitz lebecho. V'kaveh el Hashem. Don't be misyayish. Daven again and again and again. And don't think to yourself, but I already davened, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu didn't listen to me. He did. He did. And maybe you need to daven more. Maybe the first set of tefillahs did something great you're not aware of, but your second set might be answered in the way you want it to be answered. So never stop davening. Yachzor v'yispal. Shenemar, kaveh el Hashem, chazak v'yamisliach v'kaveh el Hashem. I don't recall whether I shared with you, but I probably did, because this is a thought I shared many, many, many times. As you all probably know, Moshe Rabbeinu davened Tov Kuf Tes Vav Tefillas, Keminyan ve'eschanan. Ve'eschanan is Begamatya 515. Moshe davened 515 tefillas with one request. Please, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, let me go into the Holy Land. Let me go into Eretz Yisrael. I was Moshe Nefesh, the Medrash says, carrying this stubborn people in my lap for years. Please, let me go into Eretz HaKadosh together with them. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, no, it is not to be. So for many years I wondered, what happened with those 515 tefillas? What happened? Is it reasonable to believe nothing happened? Moshe Rabbeinu was the greatest tzaddik in history, greater than anyone before him and greater than anyone that would come after him. 515 tefillas did nothing. Libi yoimeli. And now we're going to do a little arithmetic. 3 times in Shas, Rosh Hashanah, Vayetzei, and Sanhedrin, the Gemara says, Shit alfin shnin have alma. The world in its present form will exist for 6,000 years. Medrash Oisi is the Rebbe Kiva, there's more an exact number. Shit alfen v'tzadik gimel shonim. 6,093 years. That's what the Medrash says. I don't know what the significance of 6,093 dafka. And it's not necessarily a machlokes between the Goramor and the Medrash. It's not really an afkam and an halacha, so maybe Chazal and Bavli just round out the number. But in Medrash it says 6,093 years. Does anybody know who was the first Jewish historian? Who was the first Jewish historian? So most of the Jewish histories were written by Maskilim, Dubnov and Gretz and others. The first Jewish historian was the great Tana Rabbi Yossi ben Chalafta. And he wrote Seder Olam. Seder Olam is quoted twice in Shas, Yavom Esayim Beis and Nided Af Mem Vov. And Seder Olam is a brief history from Odom Harishon till the Tkuf of the Tanoim, composed by Rabbi Yossi ben Chalafta, one of Chameshes Rabbi Seinu Shebedorim, the great Talmidim of Rabbi Kiva ben Yosef. So Moshe Rabbeinu passed away, Beis Alofim Tov Pei Ches Mebrias Olam. 2,488 years Mebrias Olam. If you subtract 2,488 from 6,093, you're left with 3,605. And that is exactly Tov Kuf Tes Vav Shmitten. 7 times 515 is 3,605. Libi Yoimali. HaKadosh Baruch Hu gets these precious tefillahs. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows, never before and never again will I have these precious tefillahs from Moshe Rabbeinu, the greatest individual ever to live. What am I going to do with these tefillahs? Will I grant Moshe Rabbeinu's request? Let him go into Eretz Yisrael? Moshe Rabbeinu's children, Klal Yisrael, desperately will need these tefillahs to make it to the finishing line. Kodesh Baruch Hu knows how difficult this galus would be. Thousands of years of galus, of Hester Ponim, of pain and suffering and darkness. How would we guarantee that they'll make it? They need these tefillahs. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu takes those tough kuf tes vav tefillahs, and instead of granting Moshe Rabbeinu's request, those tefillahs keep us going for 515 shmitten. So not always, even the greatest of tzaddikim, not always are his prayers answered the way he wanted. But they always do something. Did I uncover something Moshe Rabbeinu didn't know? No, that's impossible. So the Medrash says in Parshas Vayetzei Brocha, when Moshe Rabbeinu davens and he pleads with the Kodesh Baruch Hu, Ebrunu ve'ere es ha'oretz ha'toivo. Kodesh Baruch Hu says, Moshe, wait a minute, stop. In the past, you asked me, Slachno la'avoinu amazeh. And now you're asking, Ebrono. It is for you to decide, what do you want, Slachno or Ebrono? And I will do whatever you want. Kodesh Baruch Hu tells Moshe. But you need to choose. Is it Ebrono or Slachno? What did Moshe Rabbeinu choose? Obviously, he said, if it's for me to choose, then I'm staying right here. I want to care for all the coming generations of Eden. And that is why Moshe Rabbeinu didn't come into Eretz Yisrael, and that is why we're still around, because of Moshe Rabbeinu's choice. And he says, Slachno comes before Ebrono. So every tefillah goes up l'shamayim. And that is the importance of tefillah and the importance of tefillah b'tzibur. I forgot to mention that today's shir I did have in mind, but I didn't mention it. Today's shir is dedicated L'ilon Shmosai of Rav Tzaddik Rabbi Yankiv Yisrael ben Shloim Shmuel, the grandfather of our beloved Rosh Hashiva. As you probably know, the Rosh Hashiva comes from Rebbeisha ancestry. His grandfather was the Chernobyl Rebbe, and he's a Ben Achaben from the great Chernobyl Rebbes of Yor, Rabbi Aaron Chernobyl, and the Chernobyl Magid. So today's shir is dedicated to L'ilon Shmosai of Rabbi Yankiv Yisrael ben Reb Shloim Shmuel. Rosh Hashiva, your great Zaidi, should be a Melech Yosef for the entire family, and you should be able to keep up your amazing Harbotzas Torah b'shalva, b'simcha, b'nachas, and we should all share b'sodas toivus. HaKadosh Baruch Hu should be Shomea Tfilas Kol Peh Am Yisrael Barachamim, and we should see Be'idgalia how our prayers are answered, and we should be Zoicha L'Rachamei Shamayim and Bekora B'Yameinu Lirois Pnei Moshiach Tzedkenu B'Mheru V'Yomeinu Amen. Good Shabbos, good Shabbos.